It didn't match our aesthetic, she said casually, dropping the words like crumbs on the kitchen island. I stood there, blinking at her, holding the empty velvet case I had pulled from the back of my husband's wardrobe. The antique Omega, the one James wore on our wedding day in 1973, was gone. You sold it, my voice cracked. She didn't even look up from her smoothie. It was just sitting there, collecting dust. We're redesigning the study. You wouldn't understand the Scandinavian vibe. Right then, I forgot how to breathe. That watch was older than she was. It had survived 2 recessions, 3 house moves, and James's heart surgery. It was the last thing he wore before the coroner zipped him into that black bag. And now it was gone, because it clashed with her minimalist Pinterest board. I wanted to scream. But my son David had just walked in holding the baby. He smiled. "Mum, do you want some juice?" He didn't know yet. She hadn't told him. She never did. You know, if you've ever watched someone erase your entire history with just one sentence, "Stay with me until the end," and if you've ever seen someone like me get pushed out of their own family, please comment the city you're watching from, so I know where in this country women like me are being silenced. And hit subscribe if you want to see how women like me fight back without ever raising our voices. The kitchen was quiet, too quiet for what had just happened. She didn't flinch, didn't apologize. Instead, she took a sip of that avocado concoction like she was hydrating after a good workout. I tightened my grip on the empty case. My fingers found the worn satin lining. It still smelled like cedarwood and James's cologne. I swallowed hard and forced myself to sit at the counter opposite her. So I said, pretending I wasn't dying inside, "Where did it go?" She shrugged. "I put it on Facebook Marketplace. Some guy from Silver Lake picked it up. Cash." He was thrilled. Cash, Silver Lake. Like it was a second-hand armchair. "You didn't think to ask me." I tried to keep my voice calm, steady, not to crack under the weight of what I'd just heard. She finally looked at me. "Well, it's not like you wear it." And David said it was fine. He said it was just a thing. My son, my James's son, said it was just a thing. I stared at her, stunned. My daughter-in-law, Marissa, was always precise, perfect, cold, in a way that passed for composed. She ironed her baby's onesies, labeled her spice jars, color-coded her dish towels. But I never imagined she would casually erase my husband from our home one item at a time. And this wasn't just an item. This was him. James gave me that watch box the night before our wedding. He had held it out with shaking hands and whispered, "In case I forget to look nervous tomorrow." I had laughed, kissed his forehead, and told him he'd make a fine husband, even if he didn't know how to wear a tie. After he passed away, I kept the watch in the back of his closet. I never opened the box. It was sacred, untouched, full of memories I wasn't ready to unfold. Until that morning. I don't know what made me go into the room. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way Marissa had been rearranging, quietly moving my things, packing up James's old cufflinks, turning the guest bedroom, my room, into what she called a wellness retreat. Whatever it was, something told me to look. And now here I was, holding a ghost. I stood up. "Where's the cash?" I asked, surprising even myself with how cold my voice had gotten. She blinked. "What? The money? You said he paid cash. That was my husband's watch. Where's the money?" She laughed. Laughed. "Oh, come on, Helen. I bought a credenza for the hallway. You'll love it. Matches the mirror in the entry. Very clean lines." She had sold my husband's watch to buy a credenza. I stepped out of the kitchen before I did something I'd regret. David followed me, bouncing the baby on his hip. "Hey, what's going on?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not with tears threatening to crack my voice open like glass. Instead, I walked up the stairs slowly, one step at a time, into my room, except it wasn't mine anymore. The walls were pale grey now. My floral comforter had been replaced by some taupe blanket. The bookshelf where I kept my travel journals was gone, replaced by a full-length mirror and a small white Buddha. My rocking chair, the one James bought me when I was pregnant with David, was sitting in the hallway. It hit me then, with the weight of 100 goodbyes, they were erasing me. Not just James, me. One item, one memory, one object at a time, replaced with sleek, impersonal things. Clean lines, neutral tones, Scandinavian vibes, and David Sweet distracted, David was letting it happen. That night, I lay awake and stared at the ceiling. I could hear them downstairs laughing, talking about baby food brands and a new backsplash. I wasn't part of the conversation. I hadn't been for months. The next morning, I opened the hall closet to get my gardening gloves and found my photo albums packed in a labeled bin, Misc Memorabilia. I hadn't labeled them. I opened it. Inside, James's Navy medals were wrapped in brown paper. My wedding dress vacuum sealed. A note was taped to the inside of the bin. Ask if we can donate this stuff. That broke me. Not because she called my life stuff, not because she wanted to donate it, but because she left the note where I would find it. No signature. Just M, like she was the new lady of the house. And maybe she was. That night at dinner, she told me I had double-booked the oven and that from now on she'd be in charge of the calendar. David nodded like it was a great idea. I wanted to scream. Instead, I reached for my water, and that's when I saw it, my husband's old wristwatch, the one I thought was gone, on the wrist of her friend, sitting at the dining table. A guest I didn't even know, wearing James's watch like a fashion accessory. "Nice piece, huh?" he said, smiling at me, lifting the watch proudly. "Got it for a steal. Marissa's got an eye for this kind of stuff." I stared, open-mouthed, betrayed. Marissa smiled. "It suits him better, don't you think?" I pushed my chair back and stood up. David looked confused. "Mom, I'm done," I said quietly. "Excuse me." I locked myself in the bathroom and tried to breathe. The woman had sold my husband's watch to a friend and served me dinner next to it. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was war. Have you ever had something stolen from you? Not just physically, but spiritually. Have you ever watched someone treat your history like a garage sale? Please tell me in the comments. Your voice matters. I want to hear from anyone who's ever felt like they were being replaced politely. But what I didn't know was this. The watch was only the beginning. She had bigger plans. And I had no idea what she'd already done behind my back. The morning after the dinner, the one where I saw my husband's watch ticking on the wrist of a stranger, I woke up to silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from peace. The kind that makes your skin crawl. The kind that feels curated. I padded down the hallway in my slippers, only to stop in front of the laundry room. The door was slightly ajar. Something was missing. The scent. It used to smell like lavender and old cedar. James had always loved the cedar sachets I tucked between towels. But now the air was sharp. Citrus. Bleach. Artificial. I pushed the door open. My laundry basket was gone. So was my detergent. In its place sat a sleek white hamper with labels on each section. His, hers, baby. There was no mine. I turned and opened the linen closet. Everything had been refolded. The floral sheets James and I had picked out on our 30th anniversary trip to Vermont, gone. In their place, grey cream, slate blue. Every trace of me had been neutered, neutralized, redesigned. I checked the drawers in the hallway console. My gardening gloves were gone. So were the envelopes with my calligraphy. I opened the bottom drawer once my recipe archive and found it filled with tea towels and a candle labeled Eucalyptus Mindfulness. It was like I was being replaced one drawer at a time. At breakfast, I asked David, "Did you move the recipe cards?" He looked up from the newspaper, blinked. "What recipe cards?" Marissa chimed in from across the table. "Oh, I digitized everything. Much easier to organize. I'll show you the Google Drive." My hand froze on the rim of my teacup. "You threw them away." "No," she said too quickly. "I think I recycled them. But don't worry, I scanned the good ones." James's handwriting, his little notes in the margins, the tiny hearts he drew next to my name on recipes I made when we were young and broke. Gone. recycled, because they didn't match the drive. I pressed my lips together and focused on my toast. You okay, Mom? David asked. I nodded. Just a bit of heartburn. Marissa passed me a turmeric supplement. Later that day, I found a box in the garage labeled Sentimental Storage Pending. Inside, my wedding china, my photo of James in uniform, a certificate from the hospital board where I volunteered for 26 years. All packed, all labeled, all put away like clutter. I stood in that garage for a long time, not angry, not even shocked anymore, just empty. That night, I asked David if we could talk privately. He smiled. Sure. We stepped out onto the back patio. The lights were soft, strung above the deck. I watched his face, so like his father's. I feel like things are shifting, I said carefully. Like I'm not really part of things anymore. David frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I hesitated, decisions are being made. Spaces changed. And I'm not included. He paused. Mom, we just want things to be easier for you. By removing me, I asked, keeping my voice steady. He sighed. No one's removing you. Marissa's just organizing. It's her way. Her way. Her aesthetic. Her house. That word again. House. Not home. I returned to my room. The light had been changed to a dimmable LED bulb. The rocking chair, James's chair, was gone again. I checked the hallway. Empty. I went to the garage. Nothing. I found it the next day. In the nursery. Painted white. A linen throw draped over the arm. Marissa saw me looking and smiled. I read white paint is more calming for infants, she said, rubbing her belly. Belly? Wait. Are you? She nodded. Just found out. Due in February. I blinked. My son hadn't told me, not a word. She placed a hand on her stomach and said softly, We're calling this the beginning of our legacy. Legacy. That word twisted like a knife. Because that watch, that recipe box, that rocking chair, they were part of mine. And now even my legacy was being rebranded. That evening, I opened my closet to find my church dress missing. The one I wore when James won the Veterans Award. I asked her about it. Oh, she said, stirring risotto. It had a little mildew on the hem. Don't worry, I donated it. You should really do a closet purge, Helen. Studies show clutter ages the brain. I didn't say a word. I sat at the table folding my napkin again and again. The next day, I received a calendar invite from Marissa titled Quarterly Home Flow Review. The description read, Let's walk through the zones of the house and assess optimal functionality. Bring suggestions, but keep in mind the unified design aesthetic. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. I replied, declined. That night, I found the mail tray moved. My letter from the Social Security office was opened. Sorry, Marissa said, brushing her hair in the hallway. I thought it was for David. I really think you should consider e-statements. Paper mail is so vulnerable. Vulnerable. That was exactly how I felt. Every drawer, every decision, every meal. I was being observed, redirected, minimized. And the worst part, it was all so polite, so pleasant. One morning, I poured myself a cup of tea, only to find the kettle missing. I gave it to Goodwill, she said, not even glancing up. We're switching to an all-match kitchenware look. Don't worry, I'll show you how to use the electric one. I wanted to ask, when did you decide this was yours to control? But instead, I went outside to sit in the sun. The garden was the one space she hadn't touched. Yet. You know, sometimes control doesn't come in the form of shouting or threats. Sometimes it comes through pastel emails and reorganized silverware drawers. Have you ever felt that slow suffocation, like you're still visible, but only as part of someone else's design? Please, if you've gone through this kind of quiet erasure, share it in the comments. Someone else reading might find the courage to name it because of you. I returned to the kitchen that evening to find a brochure on the counter. Crescent Meadows Independent, Living with Modern Touch. My name was written in pencil at the top. When I turned to the back, a note had been paper-clipped to it. Just a thought. I stared at that little dash. Just a thought. Just a suggestion. Just a shift. But I knew. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't confused. This wasn't the natural rhythm of change. This was a strategy. And they were getting bolder. That night, David knocked on my door. "Mom, do you have a second?" I opened it. He looked tired. "Marissa said you seemed upset. Are you okay?" I nodded slowly. "I'm fine." "Are you sure? I just need a little space." He smiled. "That's what Crescent Meadows is for. It's not a nursing home. It's freedom. Freedom. Funny how they sell exile as freedom." I closed the door without replying. But something told me this was only the beginning of her plan. And I was about to find out how far she'd go to erase me completely. I started counting silences. Not moments, not memories. Silences. The way the hallway no longer echoed with my name. The way the baby stopped reaching for me when I walked into the room. The way David, my son, began to say, "I'll check with Marissa" before every conversation. I was becoming optional. One morning, I came downstairs to find the living room buzzing with soft chatter. Marissa's mother was there, perched on my armchair, spooning pureed squash into the baby's mouth. "Oh," I said, trying to smile, "didn't know we had company." Marissa didn't look up from her tablet. "Mom's here for the week. She's helping us with the baby schedule." Her mom for a week? I turned to David. "You didn't tell me." He shrugged, distracted. "I thought she mentioned it." She hadn't. That afternoon I made tea and tried to feed the baby. But the little one turned his face. When I tried again, he fussed and reached out not to me but to Marissa's mom. She smiled. "He knows who's here for him." I didn't say a word. I just quietly placed the spoon down. The next day, I opened the calendar in the kitchen. My usual Monday walk with Emma, my best friend, was missing. In its place, nursery paint consultation. M&D only. "Did someone edit this?" I asked. Marissa turned from the sink. "Oh, I thought you said you didn't have energy for walks lately." I hadn't said that. I would never say that. In the following days, mail stopped arriving in the tray. The babysitter stopped calling me Grandma and started calling me Mrs. Helen. Even the dog, my late husband's old hound Oscar, was being walked at different hours, never with me. When I asked David about it, he said, "Oh, I thought you wanted more rest time." Again, words I never said. I began writing things down. Who said what? Who removed which drawer labels? Who adjusted my medication tray? Because I began to worry. Maybe I was forgetting. Maybe I was imagining. Wasn't that what gaslighting does? It doesn't scream. It whispers, "You're probably confused." One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found a conversation trail cut short. "She's been leaving the kettle on again," Marissa whispered. "I'm not sure she remembers the gate code anymore," said her mother. "I do," I said firmly. They turned. "I do remember the code. I haven't left the kettle on once. And I certainly didn't agree to remove my name from the mailbox." That night, I stood outside the nursery listening. Marissa was reading a story. "And this is what we call a chosen family," she said sweetly. "Sometimes we choose who feels safe. Not everyone is safe, remember." Safe? I pressed a hand to my chest. I hadn't done anything unsafe. But I knew that word. I'd worked as a hospital volunteer for years. Safe was what you said before you removed someone's rights. The next morning, I tried to call my sister. The phone was dead. No dial tone. Marissa looked up from the baby monitor when I asked. "Oh, I disconnected the landline. No one uses those anymore." But that was my number. For 42 years. "Well, I moved your doctor's number to my phone. If anyone needs you, they can go through me." I stood in the hallway, fingers numb, and realized I didn't even have a number anymore. When Emma finally stopped by, she was surprised to find me outside. "You didn't return my text." "I never got it." She frowned. "I sent 3. Marissa said you weren't feeling social." My mouth went dry. "Emma," I whispered, "I never got a message." That night, I sat on my bed reading the same page of a book for over an hour. I couldn't remember what I had read, or maybe I could, but I no longer trusted myself to say for sure. Have you ever been made to doubt your own memory? Not because you're aging, but because someone wants you to believe you're fading? Tell me in the comments. You may help someone else realize they aren't imagining it either. 2 nights later, I woke to find the hallway light on. Voices. I peeked through the door. Marissa and David were in the office. She didn't log out again, Marissa whispered. I can talk to her, David replied gently. She could click something. It's dangerous. I'm not being cruel, I'm protecting her. Protecting me. The next day, I found my laptop missing from the table. In its place, a white tablet with Helen engraved on the back. I set up a simpler interface, Marissa said. Fewer buttons, fewer accidents. Accidents. I'd never once clicked the wrong thing. Later that afternoon, I overheard Marissa on the phone. Yes, she still insists on cooking for herself. But I've removed all non-induction cookware. She can't turn on the stove anymore. I checked. She was right. I no longer had the tools to make eggs in my own kitchen. I sat outside on the bench in the garden, the only place left untouched. The baby wasn't brought out to see me. Emma hadn't called back. Even my clothes were being donated without asking. I was still alive, still breathing, but I was disappearing. And then, one night, while putting away folded towels, I overheard something through the slightly cracked office door. A phone call. I spoke to the memory care coordinator today. We'll need her doctor's referral for the next step. It was Marissa's voice. Memory care. I stepped back from the door like it had burned me. That's what this was all about. They weren't just erasing me. They were building a case to say I didn't remember, a case to say I couldn't live here, a case to make this house theirs completely. But I still had my mind. And now I knew I needed to prove it. It started with a fall. Not a dramatic one, not the kind where bones snap or heads bleed. Just a small, humiliating stumble on the front steps. I had been bringing in the mail. The sun was low, my knee stiffer than usual. My foot caught the edge of the step, and I tumbled sideways, landing hard on my shoulder. I lay there for a few seconds, stunned by the impact and the eerie stillness of the moment. Then the door opened. Oh my God, Marissa gasped. Are you okay? David rushed out behind her, cradling me like I was porcelain. They helped me inside. Ice was fetched, pillows propped, but something felt off. Their concern was real, but it was too immediate, too ready, as if they'd been expecting it. Later that evening, as I rested on the couch, I overheard her on the phone again. No, not serious. But I think it supports what we've been noticing. The disorientation, the instability, disorientation, instability. I sat up straighter. This wasn't concern. This was documentation. The next morning, David drove me to a clinic just to be safe. But when we arrived, it wasn't urgent care. It was a neurocognitive assessment center. I thought we were checking my shoulder, I said quietly. He looked away. They can look at that too. A nurse led me through a sterile hallway and into a room that smelled like dry paper and anxiety. They handed me a clipboard, timelines, shape drawings, word recall. I played along, but inside I was screaming. When we returned home, the house felt different, like something had shifted. Boxes, files, movement. Later that evening, I found Marissa in the study, scanning documents with a neat little device that fed each page into the cloud. Digitizing old records, she explained brightly. Tax stuff, property files, all that boring admin. So much easier when it's searchable. I stared at the papers. Some were in James's handwriting. Others were deeds. One looked like a power of attorney document. She caught me looking and slid it under another page. Nothing exciting, just cleanup. That night, I sat in bed, unable to sleep. Something didn't sit right. Why was she scanning legal documents? Why did David avoid eye contact when I mentioned the word trust? Why was my name slowly vanishing from every drawer document and decision? The next day, I received a text from someone I hadn't heard from in a long time. Hi, Helen. It's Rosa. Remember me? Just found something of yours. Can I swing by? Rosa had been our housekeeper for years before Marissa insisted on modernizing the household systems, which apparently meant firing everyone with an actual heart. I told her to come by at noon while Marissa and David were out. When Rosa arrived, she handed me a small padded envelope. I found this stuffed behind the dresser drawer when I was helping a neighbor pack. I think it's yours. I opened it. Inside was a folded yellowing letter, James's handwriting, and a USB drive. The letter was short. If anything ever happens to me, don't trust the smile. Look for the folder in the red box in the attic. It's all there. Love you forever. Jay. My breath caught. I turned to Rosa. Did you ever clean the attic? She shook her head. Marissa said it was off limits. I waited until the house was quiet, climbed the attic stairs slowly, found the red box, and inside, a manila folder labeled Living Trust, 2007 update. H retains rights. There was also a printed email chain, a notarized signature, and handwritten notes in James's messy scrawl. Underlined words. Do not let anyone alter without Helen's consent. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages. It was all there, proof that James had ensured I had a legal claim to the house, that my residency couldn't be revoked without due process, that I wasn't just a guest here, I was part owner. And yet I'd nearly been carted off for assessment. I sat on the attic floor, heart pounding the folder in my lap, and whispered, "You knew. You saw this coming." James had known. On some level, he'd anticipated someone might try to cut me out. Not like this. Maybe not Marissa. But still he'd tried to protect me, and I had nearly forgotten who I was. That night, I didn't sleep. I made copies of everything. I hid one set in the back of a cookery book in the pantry. I mailed another to Emma, and I kept the originals with me, hidden in a zipped compartment of my handbag. The next morning, Marissa was cheerful. "How's your shoulder?" "Better," I replied calmly. She handed me a teacup. I added turmeric and CBD, supposed to calm mental inflammation. Mental. There it was again. I smiled. Then I excused myself and went to the garden. It's strange how one envelope, one piece of forgotten truth can change everything. When you feel like you're disappearing, it only takes one person, a housekeeper, a stranger, a letter from the past to remind you that you're still real. Have you ever had someone outside your story reveal something that changed your view of everything? Tell me in the comments. I want to know who was your Rosa. That afternoon, Marissa asked to see me in the study. "I've scheduled a meeting with a geriatric consultant," she said. "It's just a formality." I smiled again. "Oh, perfect. I'll bring my lawyer." Her eyes froze. "What lawyer?" "I've retained representation," I said, sipping my tea. "It's just a formality." She blinked. "You don't need." "Of course not." I cut in gently. "But just in case anything legal arises, you never know with trusts." She didn't respond. I watched her spine stiffen. Then she turned back to her laptop. From that moment on, I kept my head down and my eyes open. Because now I wasn't just grieving, I was preparing. I no longer questioned what was happening. I knew. And I wasn't going to be erased without a fight. I bought the recorder the next morning. Not online. Not delivered. I walked to a local electronics store on the edge of town, paid in cash, and tucked it inside my coat. It was small, thumb-sized, black, with a sliding switch and 36 hours of memory. It was time to start listening. That night, I slipped it beneath the bookshelf in the study. The next morning, I slid it into the linen closet. The day after that, it lived behind a fake plant in the hallway. And every evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I crept into the laundry room, plugged in my headphones, and listened. For the first 3 days, nothing. Just clinking dishes, casual conversations, the sound of the dog snoring under the table. But then, on the 4th day, I heard it. "Marissa, she's still resisting, even with the Crescent Meadows suggestion. David Mom's stubborn. Always has been. Marissa. It's more than stubbornness. Her memory slips the instability. It's a pattern. David, she's not unstable, she just doesn't want to let go. Marissa cold. She doesn't need to want to. She just needs to make it easier for us to intervene legally." I replayed it 3 times. Intervene legally. My throat tightened, but my hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Because now I wasn't just watching the erasure. I was documenting it. I began logging everything in a notebook hidden in the bottom of my sewing basket. The missed messages, the calendar edits, the lost mail, the furniture rearrangements. Each action had a time, a date, a witness, if applicable. Each entry built a scaffold around a simple truth. They were trying to render me invisible. And I refused. Next, I retrieved the USB Rosa had returned. Inside were several folders. One labeled Trust Documents, 2007. Another, James Voice Notes. I clicked the latter. My husband's voice crackled through the speaker. Recorded on some old dictaphone, faint but steady. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And if you're still in that house, Helen, you have every right to stay, no matter what anyone says. The lawyer's name is Kaplan, Martin Kaplan, Glendale. He knows everything. Kaplan. I hadn't heard that name in 15 years, but I would now. That week, I took a taxi to Glendale and showed up at his office without an appointment. Martin Kaplan was older, greyer and slower to stand than I remembered. But when he saw the folder in my hand and James's signature on the final page, his eyebrows rose. I haven't seen this in years, I explained. Not everything just enough. He scanned the documents. If what you're describing is accurate, then yes, this trust is still enforceable. They would need your consent to alter anything related to ownership or power of attorney. And if they've tried, I asked. His jaw tightened. Then they may be in breach. He handed me his card. Document everything. Don't confront them. Not yet. Let me do the legal part. You do the quiet part. And so I did. I began taking photos of drawers where my prescriptions were moved, of screens where my profile was removed from the insurance account, of calendar invites I never received. And I called Emma. She came that Friday, bringing cookies and a hug that nearly undid me. I got your envelope, she whispered. She wasn't smiling. Whatever you need, she said. I'm in. We devised a simple system code, words over text if I needed help. A weekly coffee at the public library. A duplicate phone stored in her glove compartment. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. Then something unexpected happened. One of the voice recordings I placed on a random Tuesday captured a conversation in the nursery. Marissa, I filed it already. If we get the doctor's signature, the court will assume she's declining. Her mother. Did she actually agree to be evaluated? Marissa, no. But that's the beauty of it. Once we have a doctor on paper, the rest is just paperwork. That night, I typed out a full transcript and sent it to Kaplan. He replied within the hour, "This is significant. Keep going. I'll prepare a motion." Do you know that feeling when you realize the threat is real but you're no longer afraid of it? I felt that in my chest for the first time in weeks. I was no longer prey, but one question lingered. Why? Why go this far? Was it about space? About control? About ego? Then one evening I opened the mail, a letter addressed to David, from a real estate brokerage. Inside a full-color portfolio titled Renovation plus Resale Opportunities for 1042 Sycamore Ave. My address. My home. They weren't just pushing me out. They were planning to sell the house. Have you ever discovered someone was planning your future without you while smiling to your face? It's a particular kind of betrayal. Not loud, but permanent. If that's ever happened to you, tell me in the comments. Someone else may find the courage to name what's happening in their life too. That night, I returned the recorder to its spot under the bookshelf. And for the first time, I whispered aloud to the darkness, "I'm ready." Because what I didn't know was she'd already prepared her next move, and it would hit closer to home than I ever imagined. I never planned to become this person. Not when I married David. Not when we moved in with his mother. Not even when the baby came. I told myself I was doing what was best for everyone. For the family. For the child. But somewhere along the way, I stopped caring whether I was the villain in her story. Because I was tired of waiting for someone to make space for me. I grew up in a house where legacy meant survival. My mother was a daycare worker who never got promoted. My father left before I turned 9. I learned early that home was not a place you inherit. It's a place you build with your fingernails if necessary. When I met David, I didn't just fall in love, I saw a way out. He was warm, steady, raised in stability, raised by a woman who kept every receipt, every recipe, every inch of her husband's legacy preserved like a museum. A woman who didn't think I measured up the moment I walked into her pristine kitchen with the wrong brand of olive oil. She never said it aloud. Helen didn't need to. She smiled politely when I made David's favorite casserole, then remembered a better version from 1992. She offered to take over when I rocked the baby too fast. She refolded the laundry after I'd already done it. It was always gentle, always invisible. But every micro move said the same thing. This is still my house, my son, my system. So yes, I started with small things. I swapped out the pillows. I replaced the curtains. I boxed the linens that reminded me of a waiting room. It wasn't about dominance. It was about breathing. I needed a corner of this home to feel like mine, like the life I was trying to create wasn't just a footnote in someone else's scrapbook. But she noticed. Of course she did. She noticed every drawer, every schedule change, every shift in air temperature. She started watching me like I was the one trespassing. So I made a decision. If she refused to make space, I would take it. When I sold the watch, I didn't expect her to find out so quickly. It was a spontaneous listing, genuine, vintage, decent price. I was going to use the money to buy a credenza that matched the new aesthetic. It was just a watch, to me, but to her, it was a symbol. I should have known. After that, things changed. She became quieter but more present. She hovered, like someone expecting an ambush. Her eyes started flicking to the corners of rooms, like she was looking for proof. She wasn't wrong, because I was planning. I spoke to the memory care center after the fall. Was it manipulative? Maybe. But after the baby was born, I saw how quickly things could go wrong. A loose gate, a forgotten bottle, an unlocked stove. I didn't feel safe anymore, not with a woman who couldn't keep track of her own shoes some days. Yes, I exaggerated. Yes, I mentioned signs of decline. Yes, I documented things selectively. But I had a child to protect. And a home to claim? David didn't see it. He still looked at his mother like she was indestructible. He still defaulted to her roast chicken recipe, still asked her to check over our tax documents, still assumed she'd be here forever. But I saw the changes, the hesitation, the way she repeated questions when stressed. And even if she wasn't losing her mind, she was losing her place. The idea to sell the house came from a podcast. We were driving back from the pediatrician when I heard the episode Modernizing Legacy Reclaiming Homes for the New Generation. The expert said something that stuck with me. You can't build your future on someone else's memory. You have to design your own. I wrote it down. That night, I pulled the deeds from the fireproof box. It wasn't fraud. I didn't forge anything. I just looked. I reviewed the trust documents, took photos, bookmarked a few real estate websites, requested evaluation. Nothing illegal? Not yet. But then Kaplan got involved. The lawyer, I saw his name on a voicemail David played on speaker by accident. Helen's lawyer, he said, confused. I smiled and said nothing. Inside, I panicked. Because Kaplan knew the original trust. Because Kaplan had been James's friend. Because Kaplan was the one person who could dismantle everything I'd quietly built. I considered stopping, pausing the plan, scaling it back. But then Helen did something that made my decision for me. She looked me in the eyes one morning while brushing the baby's hair and said, I used to think I was building something for my family. Now I think I was just renting time. And she smiled, like she'd already won. That was the moment I knew. I couldn't go back. So I doubled down. I deleted the digital scans she might have saved. I called a notary behind David's back. I made sure the home security cameras were angled toward the nursery and away from the study. I printed forms for durable medical power of attorney. I told David it was for just in case. You may think I'm cruel. You may think I'm ungrateful. But let me ask you something. If you were offered a life of control, security, and safety for your child, but the only price was one woman's silence, would you hesitate? If you've ever faced that kind of impossible decision or justified something questionable for the people you love, share your thoughts in the comments. Not to be judged, to be understood, because I don't think I'm a monster. I think I'm a mirror, and some people don't like what they see when they look into me. So yes, I'm going to finish this. I'm going to finalize the transition. I'm going to own this home in name, spirit, and design before she can stop me, before she remembers too much, before anyone believes her. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday you don't expect to change your life. I was walking back from the library, my one weekly escape, when I heard someone calling my name from across the street. Helen Whitmore. I turned. A woman with a pixie haircut and oversized glasses waved from the front yard of the old Mason house. I'm sorry, I said, squinting. Do I know you? She laughed. You might not recognize me, but I remember you. I'm Claire. Claire Monroe. I was James's paralegal, years ago. My heart skipped. Claire, I breathed. You helped with the living trust. She smiled. Exactly. I still remember how particular he was about those documents. Said they needed to outlive 3 generations of bad decisions. I chuckled, then sobered. Do you still work in law? Not anymore, she said, stepping closer. But I've kept tabs on some of the firms. Why? I hesitated. Then I told her carefully, cautiously, what had been happening. I didn't give names. I didn't accuse. I just described changes. Documents disappearing. Voices whispering. Plans being made behind my back. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, Would you mind if I took a look at something? That afternoon, I showed her the scanned copies I'd taken of the trust. The same ones Kaplan had. Claire leaned over them at my kitchen table, flipping slowly. She stopped at one signature. This page, she murmured. It's not right. What do you mean? She pulled out her phone and opened a photo album. I still have a picture of James's signature from 2010, for a different case. Look. She held the screen beside the page. My breath caught. The J was off. The slope of the H was wrong. The spacing too even. This one, she said quietly, has been traced. Possibly replicated digitally. I sat back, the air punched from my lungs. They forged his signature. She looked at me gently. I'm not making accusations. But if this was used to modify ownership or give someone power of attorney, especially without your signature, it's legally meaningless. And potentially criminal. My hands shook. Can you write that down? I'll do better, she said, rising. I'll send Kaplan a sworn statement. I still have my notary certification. I'll make sure it's official. It was the first time in months I felt my spine straighten fully. Claire wasn't family. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't entangled. She was a voice from outside the storm, and she saw everything clearly. That evening, Kaplan called. I received Claire's affidavit. It's damning. Can we act? He exhaled. Not yet. But now we can pressure. And once we have a statement from David, or a misstep from Marissa, we file. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen watching Marissa stir almond milk into her coffee, like nothing was unraveling behind her. I bumped into Claire Monroe yesterday, I said casually. Her hand froze mid-stir. Oh, she says hello. She remembers James fondly, especially the day he added the clause that no document can override my standing without a dual signature. Marissa said nothing. I smiled and walked away. That afternoon, David found me in the garden. Claire emailed me. I didn't reply. She said you were worried, that you think someone's trying to push you out. I turned to him. David, I don't think it. I know it. He rubbed the back of his neck. Look, I know Marissa has strong opinions, but she's trying to modernize things, make life easier. For whom I asked. Because it's certainly not for me. He didn't answer. That night, Kaplan sent me a draft. A formal petition to freeze all ownership transfers, pending verification of trust integrity. I printed it, folded it, slipped it into the family command center binder, the one Marissa kept by the fridge, labeled important. The next morning I found it moved, but not gone, just relocated. She was watching me now. Good. Do you know how it feels when someone outside the family sees you clearly, maybe for the first time, when you realize you're not crazy, not paranoid, not fading? Sometimes the truth doesn't come from inside the house. Sometimes it arrives across the street, holding a notary stamp and a memory. Have you ever been saved by someone who wasn't even supposed to be involved? If so, I hope you'll share your story in the comments, because sometimes a stranger is the only one who can give you back your name. That night, I stood by the nursery door and listened to Marissa hum to the baby. Her voice was sweet. her tone even. But I heard it now, the calculation beneath the lullaby. And I whispered just loud enough for myself to hear. You're not the only one who plans things. Because I wasn't alone anymore, and it was time to let her feel what it was like to lose control. It was David's birthday. Marissa had planned a dinner, nothing flashy, just family takeout sushi cake from that gluten-free bakery she adored. Her mother flew in. A few friends from David's office were invited. Even the neighbors dropped by for dessert. But what she didn't plan was me. I'd spent the morning ironing the same blouse James once called my war uniform. Soft blue cotton. A tiny brooch near the collar. The same one I wore when I testified on behalf of the nursing board in 2002. I didn't wear it often, only when I needed people to remember that I wasn't just David's mother. I was someone before all this. The dining room buzzed with small talk. The baby giggled in his high chair, tossing rice like confetti. Marissa played hostess, pouring wine-slicing sashimi, telling the story about how David once thought sake was soup. Everyone laughed. Then she raised her glass. To David, the man who holds this family together. Everyone clapped. I smiled. And then I stood up. Before we move on to cake, I said I'd like to say something. The room quieted. David looked at me a little surprised, but nodded. I held my wine glass steady, not for a toast, for balance. I've been living in this house for 28 years, I began. And in the past year, many things have changed. Most I've accepted, some I haven't. Marissa shifted in her seat. I continued. But one thing I won't accept is being erased. A ripple passed through the room. I placed my wine glass down gently. Then I pulled a small envelope from my purse and laid it flat on the table. This, I said, is a sworn affidavit from Claire Monroe, a former paralegal of my husband's. In it, she confirms that a key page of our family trust appears to be digitally manipulated. Gasps, whispers. Marissa's face drained of color. I didn't stop. This, I added, placing a second document down, is a legal notice drafted by Martin Kaplan, the attorney who helped James and me draft the original trust in 2007. It formally freezes any attempt to alter ownership of this house without mutual consent. David opened his mouth, stunned. And this, I said. Sliding forward, a USB drive contains 7 audio recordings, including one in which Marissa says, quote, "She doesn't need to want to leave. She just needs to make it easier for us to intervene legally." The room exploded into shocked silence. Then questions. Then tension. David, wait. What is this? Marissa. She's twisting everything. Helen am I. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printout of the real estate brochure. Because this says you were preparing to sell 1042 Sycamore Avenue for a potential 7-figure profit. Before I even knew I was on trial. Marissa stood eyes wild. She's delusional. She's been confused for months. I took a deep breath. Then I looked at David. Do you really think I'm confused? Or have you just been told that enough times to stop asking questions? He said nothing. I turned to the rest of the table. I may not be young, but I'm not invisible, and I am not confused. There are moments in life when truth enters a room like a fire alarm, and everyone has to decide whether to run, cover their ears, or finally face the smoke. Have you ever stood in a moment like that, where silence would have kept you safe, but the truth needed to be said anyway? Tell me in the comments. I want to know if you were in that room, whose side would you take? Marissa sat down slowly, then with a forced smile turned to the guests. She's had a difficult year, I smiled back calmly. So have I. Emma stood from the corner of the room, revealing herself to the guests. She's not alone, she said. Marissa blinked. I'm her witness, Emma added, and I have copies of everything. Someone clapped. It was Marissa's own friend, the one who'd worn James's watch. He looked down awkwardly at his wrist, then removed it. I didn't know he whispered, placing the watch on the table. Marissa reached for it. I beat her to it. That night, after the guests had gone, David sat beside me on the porch. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I looked at him gently. Because I didn't want to believe you'd stopped listening. He swallowed hard. I never wanted any of this. I said nothing. He reached into his pocket, pulled out an envelope. My lawyer's number. I want to make this right. Inside the house, Marissa paced the hallway like a trapped animal. I watched her through the glass. She looked up once, but this time I didn't look away, because now it was her turn to doubt every step she took. But what no one knew was that the most brutal confrontation was still to come, and it wouldn't happen in this house. It would happen in court. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, thick cream paper, raised lettering, sealed with Kaplan's signature. Superior Court of California Elder Protection Division case initiated. Whitmore versus Whitmore. Subject petition for preservation of residential rights under California. Elder abuse law. Jaupix Prarawangf. Scene 600. CQ. Marissa didn't see it coming. She stood at the island counter, pouring oat milk into her coffee, when I placed the envelope beside her plate. "What's this?" she asked, smiling. "Due process," I replied. She slid her fingernail under the seal. Her eyes moved rapidly across the page. Then her hand trembled just slightly when she reached the line that read, "Alleged attempts to remove Elder from property via coercion misinformation and forged documentation." David walked in from the living room, still in socks. "What's going on?" Kaplan stepped through the door behind me. "I'm Martin Kaplan, legal counsel for Mrs. Whitmore," he said calmly, extending a hand David didn't take. Marissa's voice rose. "You brought a lawyer into our house." "No," Kaplan said. "Your husband's house, and hers, per the 2007 Living Trust Agreement, which you attempted to override with manipulated documentation." Marissa's mouth opened. No words came. Kaplan turned to David. "Did you sign anything your wife presented as co-ownership transfer in the past 12 months? David looked between us. I don't think so." Kaplan nodded. "Good. Because if you had, I'd be introducing criminal charges this morning." We sat in the living room. Kaplan opened a leather folder and laid out the documents. The original 2007 trust. A signature verification affidavit from Claire Monroe. Audio transcripts. The scanned deed proposal Marissa had drafted and saved under family equity strategy. He spoke slowly. Under California's elder abuse law, he began the definition of abuse extends beyond physical harm. It includes isolation, psychological manipulation, and fraudulent efforts to remove an elder from her rightful residence. If successful, the perpetrator may face civil penalties, loss of property claims, and potential felony charges under Penal Code Paragraph 368. Marissa's face turned grey. "I didn't forge anything," she whispered. Kaplan didn't blink. "Then how do you explain this version of Mr. Whitmore's signature with vector inconsistencies found only in digital overlays?" He turned the page to reveal the side-by-side comparison. James's original. Marissa's version. Obvious now. Unforgivable. She turned to David. "Tell them I wouldn't do that." David stared at the table. Kaplan continued. "I am filing for a permanent restraining clause against any further modification of trust-related property, and given the circumstances, pursuing limited fiduciary review of your financial accounts under Helen's name." Marissa's voice cracked. "You're accusing me of theft." "No," Kaplan said, folding his hands. "I'm proving it." Silence. That night, I heard the sound of boxes being packed in the guest room. Not mine. Hers. David came to find me on the porch. "She says she didn't mean to hurt anyone." I nodded. "That she was just trying to simplify the estate. Make things modern." "She was trying to erase me," I said. "And if you can't admit that, then she'll do it again." He swallowed. "I know." The next morning, Kaplan filed the restraining clause. The judge granted it within 48 hours. Marissa was banned from managing or modifying any shared asset or account under my name. A forensic audit was initiated. And Kaplan delivered one last blow. He walked into the house on the third morning with a single-page letter addressed to Marissa. He handed it to her. She read it and dropped into the kitchen chair like she'd been hit. It was a formal notice of civil intent. If fraud could be proven, especially through manipulation of elder assets in violation of WIC, she could be liable for full restitution plus damages. Estimated total 487,000. The combined appraised value of my half of the home interest and emotional distress. I don't have that kind of money, she whispered. Kaplan replied. Then I suggest you don't try to take what isn't yours. Do you believe this is justice? Is restitution enough when someone spends months trying to erase a person's history? Let me know in the comments. Do you think she deserves more, or have we done enough to make her stop? That afternoon, Marissa sat in the living room, her laptop closed, her hair undone. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. But she looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in a year. I underestimated you? I nodded. Most predators do, because here's what they never tell you. A legacy doesn't die when a man passes away. It dies when his memory is erased and his wife is told she doesn't matter. I matter. James made sure of that. And now the courts do too. But even as the papers were signed and the house protected, one thing remained. Something no lawyer could fix. Because power can be regained. But dignity takes something deeper. And I was ready to claim it. The house felt different. Not because the furniture had changed. It hadn't. Not because the curtains were new. They weren't. It was something deeper, less visible, but more permanent. For the first time in years, it felt like mine again. Marissa moved out 3 days after the court notice. She left behind only what didn't matter to her, some modern art prints, half-used skin serums, and a planner still open to the week labeled transfer execution. David stayed. At first I wondered whether it was guilt or duty. But one morning, he sat beside me on the porch and asked quietly, would it be all right if I started cooking with you again? I nodded. That evening, we made James's lemon-thyme chicken. He overcooked it. I didn't correct him. We laughed instead. The baby toddled across the kitchen floor. He called me Nana for the first time without being prompted. I nearly cried. 2 weeks later, I stood in the backyard with Emma, a clipboard in my hand, and plans pinned to the old corkboard she'd dug out of her garage. You're actually doing it? She asked. I smiled. Why not? Because most women your age want to retire, not launch things. I looked up at the sun. I'm not launching a business. I'm reclaiming my voice. The concept was simple. An intergenerational storytelling circle, weekly meetings in the garden open to women of all ages. We'd share recipes, letters, legal tips, cautionary tales, not to relive trauma, but to remind each other. We were never meant to disappear quietly. We called it the second season circle. Flyers went up at the library, the grocery store, the senior center. Within 2 weeks, we had 11 members. On the first Saturday, I brewed tea, arranged folding chairs beneath the oak tree, and brought out the velvet box. James's watch lay inside, restored, polished, still ticking. I passed it around, gently telling the story of what it had survived. The theft, the betrayal, the attempt to erase it. And then I closed the box and said, this watch didn't fight back, but I did. And sometimes that's all it takes. Have you ever seen someone rise, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in calm, undeniable power? If you've ever witnessed a woman reclaim her dignity, share it in the comments. Your story could inspire someone who thinks it's too late to begin again. 3 months later, I hosted my 75th birthday. David and the baby made a cake that collapsed in the center. Emma brought champagne and told everyone about my high school valedictorian speech. Even Marissa sent a card. She didn't apologize. She didn't need to. Her absence was enough. I stood in front of our friends and neighbors, holding a glass of something fizzy, wearing the navy blue dress I once thought too bold for my age. And I said, thank you for reminding me that life doesn't end when people try to write you out. Sometimes that's where it begins. Because power doesn't always look like courtroom victories or frozen assets. Sometimes it looks like laughter in the kitchen, or an old woman in a new dress, or a clock that still ticks even when someone tried to stop it. If you followed this story to the end, thank you. And if you want more true-feeling, emotionally real stories like this, stories about women who refuse to be erased, don't forget to hit subscribe. There are so many voices still waiting to be heard. Maybe one of them is yours.